Hey, how's it going all? Just gonna do a video on corporate America, but personalize it and just walk people through, the companies that I've worked for and just some stories that, I remember that stand out to me and, just kind of give people a bit more maybe background on, things that I've been through and, roles that I've had, in the corporate world, going from engineering to accounting and finance. And then also just to give people maybe a slight, slightly more insight into why I have such a negative view of obviously the world, but corporate America in particular, and just the foundation, its foundation, and the principles that it operates on. And it's not getting better at all. And like I've said in other videos, Babylon, which I feel is America, the Bible says will not be healed. And so it will not get better. The quote unquote wound is going to remain and get worse. And so to me, this will sort of personalize that. And, this is not like any kind of traumatic walkthrough, but it's intellectual trauma, and that's what I want to sort of highlight. Walking people through my career, and the companies that I've worked for, and some of the experiences that I've had. So it's not scripted. I just have the companies that I was working for and their dates in front of me, and I'm just going to kind of wing it, and kind of just share what I remember about my experiences there. And so out of undergrad, I just applied to a bunch of grad schools. I graduated in Canada at the University of Western Ontario with the gold medal, and I had a really high GRE score. Actually, not really high compared to other sort of technical people, but I scored 790 out of 800 on the math, a near perfect score. I remember when I actually finished the GRE exam, the woman can give you your math score right away. There's a written component which takes time for it to be assessed, but she's like, you got 790. I guess she hadn't seen that kind of a score before, and I was kind of disappointed because I knew that pretty much everybody who goes to the schools and applying to the schools that I applied for would get perfect. So I was actually kind of disappointed. But that score, coupled with my undergrad standing, gave me some flexibility in schools that I applied to. And then so I applied to, I think it was like 9 or 10 schools, like basically all the Ivy League schools, like Princeton, Harvard, and I think Yale as well. I just applied to like very, very well known schools in the Northeast because my parents are in New Jersey, and I wanted to be relatively close to them. I applied to some other schools just kind of around, like Case Western, Boston, McGill in Canada, and Rice in Houston. And so I applied to all these schools, got into 4 of them, and chose Rice because they offer you like a fellowship, so they actually like pay you, close to the poverty line, but they pay you, and I did not have to teach a course. And so Boston University, I got in, but about the same amount of money as Rice. They pay you around $25,000 a year, but I had to teach an undergrad course. And so I was like, I just finished undergrad, so I'm like, I literally have to be teaching an undergrad course, and I just thought that would be too much for me. And then so I went to Rice. It's a small school here in Houston, but very, very well known for its chemistry department because there's some Nobel Prize winners, and not much for athletics. I think it has a really good baseball team, but again, very, very well known for its natural sciences like chemistry and physics and stuff. And so, I went there. It was a PhD program. It was tough. I don't know how else to say it. Like I was very much proud of myself, to say the least. I remember an interaction with my mom the summer before I moved here to Houston. After I graduated, my mom was like, yeah, if like the engineering stuff doesn't work out, you can just, take over our stores and stuff. And I'm like, I'm about to be a doctor. I told her in like the most arrogant, incredibly arrogant statement towards my own mother, and the whole car just went silent, you know, because I just said it with such vigor and arrogance. And little did I know, you know, what was about to transpire once I took that flight down to Houston. But I was very full of myself, you know, basically. And then so I came here to Houston in 2004 and began my graduate school career. And you know, I was just out of my league. I don't know how else to say it. There was just, I found out what smart people are like. You know, the best student in our grad program at Rice was an undergrad. So he was finishing up his last year of a dual degree in electrical engineering and mathematics at Rice. And I can even put his link in the description below. He's a professor now at Caltech, and brilliant. You know, just a brilliant guy. I don't know how else to say it. He was like way ahead of us, and he was asking questions that I may think of possibly on my own, like 6 months later, you know, and some I wouldn't even think of, the way he would put things together. Like school was a joke, you know, for him. It was really a waste of time. For him as an undergrad, he was largely only concerned about research, and he was already publishing papers in undergrad, and he applied to all the top schools and got into every single one, except for the University of Illinois for some reason. I guess they just thought that he would not go there, even though it's a good school. My advisor in grad school went to University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign. It's one of the top electrical engineering schools in the world. But anyway, he went to MIT, obviously, for his PhD, won an award there, I think, for the best dissertation. And like I said, he's at Caltech now, and he was like dusting all of us. And then the second best student is now an associate professor at Georgia Tech, and he's into like machine learning and stuff like that. And this is what intelligence is. You know, I learned quickly, like, yeah, you know, I was pretty good at test taking, you know, and if somebody taught me something, I could regurgitate it fairly, you know, elegantly and accurately. But this is a different kind of intelligence, you know, that I encountered at Rice, and those are just two students of many. And Rice is not even the best double E school, arguably not even necessarily even in Texas, because UT Austin's program is also very, very good now. And so this was just a small subset of the kind of people that I've realized quickly are out there. And you know, that it's just a different level of intelligence. These people think in math. Like it's almost just as natural for them to communicate ideas to us that they see around them with words and English. They also can communicate ideas very, very elegantly and precisely and in a complete way in mathematics. And there was courses like functional analysis, real analysis, all these kind of things. There's courses called complex analysis. This kind of stuff, you go in those classes and you start realizing, okay, this is the way smart people operate mathematically. And you know, it was a very humbling experience. You know, like I said, you know, I had to swallow my pride very, very quickly. And you know, I left. They have an option basically if for people who go into these programs and realize, you know, research and an academic career is not necessarily for them, so they can still, you know, graduate with a master's and do basically a research course, and then you know, sort of gracefully leave the PhD program. And so, you know, I took that option, and you know, I still finished with a fairly strong GPA, and you know, learned quite a bit, you know, about communication systems. And the lab that I was in was growing, you know, and getting more and more notoriety. So I learned a lot from the people around me. But so that brought me to the corporate world. And so I had two offers, one at Schlumberger and another one at a company called Viasat in Carlsbad. And the CEO of that company is a Rice alum. So he recruited us heavily. And so I decided to stay in Houston because I like the city and the cost of living and all that kind of stuff. I had friends here. And so I joined Schlumberger as a software engineer, first as a seismic engineer because I was accepted into their tech and field program. And so the field component, they wanted me to go to Libya and do like actual surveying. And I'm like, no. I just went onto Wikipedia after they asked me that. And I'm like, no, I don't think I'll make it back alive. So I'm like, I'm sorry, I have to decline the offer if it requires me to go to Libya, Tripoli. And so they, worked internally and got me a quote field job within their seismic unit. And so I was processing data, seismic data, doing all the different mathematical operations on it, and denoising, deconvolution, migrations, and all that kind of stuff, and then preparing the image for our clients to assess where the oil and gas pockets are. And so then after that, there was a research component where I was working in R&E, research and engineering, and then I was writing code for these migration algorithms that I was using before I went into the research team. So this is this quote tech component of the tech and field program. And so that brought me there. And so I have, some experience, with, seismic imaging and, how acoustic waves propagate through different mediums and stuff like that. So it was a good experience. And, but then I started getting some first introduction into like the corporate world and how it was sort of slowly dismantling. And so that around that time was when I joined corporate America in June 2007, the 2008 housing crash was coming, and there were layoffs within like a year or so at Schlumberger. Schlumberger always lays off before the crashes happen. Somehow they magically know what's going to happen. So they preemptively were laying off a lot of people, like senior people, and they were quote trimming the fat. And then so that was kind of like, I didn't know what was going on. I was just first job, I was just like, whatever, I guess this is normal. And then so I was kind of clueless to the politics, but there was a lot of politics going on. And there was one internal division that I was working for that my algorithm was being used for exclusively, and they were struggling. They were trying to push this technology out. They called it seismic guided drilling, and so it was kind of real time, imaging that they were trying to offer to their clients on a daily basis to give them sort of imaging at the bit. So like as they're drilling, let's say they're drilling and then they hit something that, some resistance, and then they wanted to better understand it before they proceeded. They would sort of want their models updated and then an image produced to give them guidance on where to go and how to, better sort of maneuver around that resistance. And then so, it was getting some, market penetration, but it was struggling. And then so, I started realizing how political the environment became. Once a division is not doing well, people need to start looking for blame. And then they started blaming the technology, and like our group, our engineering group, and, it's just whatever, all that kind of stuff. To be totally honest, right from the get-go, I did not believe that this type of thing really worked. Like I was already suspicious that this algorithm could actually be useful and accurate just because of how coarse the approximation was. It was generally speaking called a map migration, where you basically shoot the rays back up to the surface, and then you try and isolate where the source and receiver was, and then you propagate those two rays back down through the new updated model to kind of get a better sense of, with the latest information as they're drilling, they're updating their what they call velocity model. So we would sort of demigrate through the older antiquated velocity model and then remigrate in the new velocity model, hoping to get a more accurate image. And so just to me, I understand the technology, it's been used before, but to use it in a way to kind of help the drilling engineer steer the bit, to me, I personally wasn't convinced. Obviously it was my job, I had to work on it, but it seemed a little bit too coarse to be useful. But maybe the technology's changed since then. But, I got some insight into like the way, the sort of internal, conflicts can arise, when things are not going well. And then so what I started also realizing is that they had a fixed step training program. And then, as time goes on, you're supposed to, after you graduate, you get, a raise and stuff like that. And so there was like really one last class, you know, that I needed, and then a mini project to do in another field. And so, you know, it was kind of being held back, you know, because they needed me to focus on this, you know, technology. And so my own sort of raise was being delayed strictly because, you know, my efforts were needed to try and help this technology advance. And so this to me is when I started realizing that, you know, the corporate structure is obviously not for an individual, you know, that no one cares, you know, about me and all that kind of stuff. Not like I necessarily needed the money at that time because I was single, just taking care of myself, but for other people, obviously it's very, very important. And so people have to pay off student loans and all that kind of stuff. And so, you know, the corporate profit is paramount, you know, for sure. And then they had additional leverage over all of us because, you know, there were layoffs, you know, recently. And so everybody was sort of on edge. I was oblivious at that time to like what was going on sort of macroeconomically, but, you know, I just remember, you know, those like 4 years or so being sort of the foundation to me getting insight now into like, you know, how evil the corporate structure is and how it's, again, purely profit driven. And then so I actually started taking some accounting courses while I was working for Schlumberger, not even necessarily thinking I was going to turn it into any kind of career or anything. I just was interested, you know, in the business world, and they allowed us a small allowance, you know, every year to take courses. So I just used that on accounting classes. And then I started becoming buddies with like a friend of a friend. And then so he was the controller, like the finance manager for our unit. And then so, you know, we got to talking, and he was like saying, you know, yeah, if you're ever interested in getting into accounting and finance, you know, people have done it, you know, from engineering within the company, and, you know, you won't be the first person. And so, you know, I started kind of looking into it and then taking the classes at a faster rate. And, you know, I was given an opportunity just by chance. I was tutoring a kid in grad school, and his parents owned a plastics company. And then so I saw that there was an opening for an accountant, and then I decided to apply. I literally just wrote, you know, I'm friends of the family. And then so that was my application. I didn't really take it seriously. And it turns out they were looking for somebody. And then what I realized in this role is, again, more politics, but I didn't really kind of understand it because I was still very new and I was learning a totally new field at this time. So really everything that I was learning, I was thankful for. Like I was just bending over daily. Like I really didn't care, you know, I didn't enjoy it, but I just sort of absorbed all the different issues, you know, and all that. But I realized what was happening now looking back. My boss, who is now, you know, unfortunately passed away from cancer, and he basically what he did was he hired a controller. He was the CFO, and then he hired a controller who he knew would not do well in the position. And then so this is what's happening in the corporate world is they'll hire people will hire other people who they know will not stay there very long or are not fit for the role. So then it gives them more job security. And so this is a strategy, and it's happening all over the place. And this is just naturally what happens when you have scarcity of resources. And so I was kind of hired to neutralize that toxic relationship because I knew the family. And then so, you know, I was learning as much as I can. And then obviously that controller left because he was let go. And, you know, I was in charge. And so I was like kind of swimming in the deep end of accounting, and I haven't even finished my degree yet, but it was a good learning experience. But then I started realizing that sort of is happening at the sort of human resources level. And then also at the day-to-day level, I just noticed we were doing everything slowly. I was like, all this stuff was inefficient. And again, I came from an engineering role, and I'm like, if we did any of this stuff for any of our algorithms, like no one would use our software. Like it was just trash, like files all over the place. Nothing balanced. It was just kind of done on, you know, the back of a napkin kind of stuff. And I'm like, this is crazy. And then, but I realize now that this is done on purpose. This is what I call fat being inserted on purpose to give job security. And so this is what's happening very much so in accounting and finance, is that things are done on slow on purpose. And so, you know, to add sort of time to it, and then so people can come across like they're busy, you know, and then people who are not in accounting and finance won't really question it because they'll just think that's just the way it is. And so I started realizing that's happening, and I didn't really know why. I just kind of had to play along and use files, and I recommended all the time to my boss, who's now passed away, I could fix this. I could make a program and, write some, scripts to pull the data from our business intelligence software, SaaS, very, very well-known, BI tool. And I was like, yeah, we can just make all these reports automated. We don't have to keep like manually pulling these things and all that kind of stuff. And he's like, no, I don't want to have to check that data and the one that we have now and have two of them going concurrently and all that kind of stuff. If I looked at some of these files now, I would literally my stomach would turn. How sloppy they were. You had to go in and plug in numbers here and there just to make it somewhat function. Very crude. And so that's what I learned. And then I've also learned too from the audit, the auditors also are inducing fat. They want to audit companies like this because then they get paid more because they can charge more hours for looking over more and more transactions. And so even like the auditing firms will support this and not make recommendations for things to be more accurate or more robust, which a good auditing firm should do. Make recommendations so that things are more accurate. They're in on it too. And so this whole thing was just a complete, it was just a joke, there was no rigor, there was no accuracy and all that kind of stuff. And again, I put up with it only because I was new to the field, it's just, I was learning new things. I just assumed that this is the way it was and I just kind of went along with it. So little did I know that would continue on over and over again. And so I did that for a few years, and then I got an offer to rejoin Schlumberger, but this time as a financial analyst back in Texas. And so I rejoined. My standing was good at Schlumberger in terms of my reviews and stuff. I was known to be a little too vocal. I remember I set up a meeting with the president of the seismic division just to give him ideas and brainstorm. And I'm like, you never do that. You're not allowed. Never really is it ever a good idea to go to your boss's boss ever. And I went to his boss's boss's boss for a lunch quick meeting, and you never do that. I was just thinking that was what people like, ambitious people and all that. That is just a complete insane, what we call career limiting moves. You don't do that. And then so that's, I guess they looked over that mistake to allow me to rejoin. But I didn't have that many friends in my first go at it, but my reviews, my yearly performance was strong every year. And I was hired into an exclusive program called Tech and Field, so that gave me a lot of sort of clout. But I rejoined and I went into moved to San Antonio in the fracking division, and then more of the same. Just files were just all over the place, just not very accurate, just kind of pretending like we're working, and panic at month end, and just all that. And again, nothing was planned. It was just, kind of spur of the moment, do everything last minute, and then create sort of chaos just so people think that we're busy. And then this was the biggest division in Schlumberger at the time, revenue generating. So there was tons of politics. Teams were forming, cliques were forming. I was hired by, like I said, my old, friend's drinking buddy. And then so I was kind of friends with my boss's boss because he was the boss of my boss. And so it was very awkward because my boss kind of knew that I was there in place to sort of not spy on him, but kind of watch what he's doing, and keep him in check. And so him and I, never got along, and I didn't understand why him and I didn't get along at the time. I'm saying all this kind of looking now in the rearview mirror, but I didn't understand why my boss didn't like me. I was just like, I'm here to help you and all that kind of stuff, but he saw me as an enemy. And then so my boss was Middle Eastern, and then this is funny. This is kind of the way it was. So it was me, my boss was Middle Eastern, his boss was a Canadian guy, and then his boss was a Middle Eastern guy. So the two Middle Eastern people were friends. And then me and this guy were friends. And then so these two were against these two. And then so it was just this cake, this layered cake of controversy. And so it was awkward, my buddy, this guy, my boss's boss would ask me for things when, he wasn't getting it from his report. And then my boss knew that. He's like, you can't be sending emails back and forth without copying me. And I just didn't know. It's not even like I was being malicious or deceptive. I didn't know that all this politics was there. I just was like innocent and just sent things. People asked me to do things, I would just do it, thinking that we're all a quote unquote team. But and then what I started noticing now, because I kind of follow Schlumberger, I have friends who still work there. These cliques that we're forming, once they get too big and too strong, they need to be broken up, because this, again, is to me the spiritual aspect of it, is that any group on the left and right hand side that gets too big, God breaks it up. God does not actually want people coming together and doing anything together. He doesn't want that. I know that's hard for people to believe, and I'm seeing it on the truth side. So it's everywhere. So God is doing this. It's not just a cold left hand Satan thing or whatever. Even on the right hand side amongst the truth community, people are just talking in circles, and this is, again, what I now realize. The vibe is everywhere, not just in corporate America and the media. It's even in the truth community. So this, again, to me, requires, God intermingling, like the Bible says, a perverse spirit. And so this is what's going on. And so it's very much, corporate America is a cliquish place now. You have to have a group, and the problem is obviously having a group is good, that has a lot of experience and power. But the problem is, if the group gets too big, it will be disbanded. And so that happened down the road, but that was just an awkward experience, because I really didn't know what was going on. And like I said, I blamed myself. And so once I kind of was realizing that I was stressed all the time, I got an offer to join Amazon in New Jersey. So I joined them in field finance, and it was more of the same. I was just I was swimming into the deeper and deeper end of corporate evil, and I didn't know. I did not know. It's easy for me to look back now and do the commentary, but this was a very awkward time for me, because I was like, man, I just kind of have bad luck, following me around. I'm like, why am I continuing to always get these like weird roles and stuff like that? My boss doesn't like me, or like, why is the vibe here kind of strange? Like, I'm being watched. And then the whole concept of a year-end review now personally makes my stomach turn. I mean, the thought of being, quote, judged by just people who are not intelligent, or just people who are completely, not even necessarily evil, because I don't think it's the individual's fault. It's just the whole system is messed up. But just the thought of being judged on a yearly basis to be in a place that I hate, to me, is ridiculous, and I won't take part in that. So I'll end off with that when I finish this. But so Amazon was kind of more of the same. I went in, I looked at all the files. I'm like, oh my God, these are crazy that we're doing labor planning like this in just such a crude way. And I kept lobbying for, like, we have to fix these, we have to automate these. And, but the problem when you automate, and I didn't know this at the time, but like, they're like, oh, this kid just comes in, joins in, thinks he knows everything, wants to take away all our job security by automating all the files, so we don't need that many people. We had like 6 or 7 people on our team for like a job that like one smart person can do. And again, this is not, now I realize that it's not my boss was a bad person. He was creating jobs for people, but the issue with that is you can't change things. You can't improve things, because then people will get fired. They won't be needed. We're already kind of bored. So like, I come in with all these ideas and, trying to like make things a button click away. And then, people are not needed anymore. So immediately I was identified as not fit, and I didn't know why. I was just like, oh man, I'm trying to come in with ideas and trying to explain things to people and teach people things. No, the corporate structure wants information in silos. People want their job security. So they don't want somebody coming and sharing all the information and teaching people other things and teaching people how to get better in Excel and automate stuff and all that. I was clueless to that. At this time, I didn't know. God literally kept that cloud over me. And really, if he didn't, I wouldn't have made it this far, because if I knew then what I know now, I just couldn't function. And it's not even like a moral thing. I just can't go to a place every day where I'm required to be stupid, and I'm not allowed to share ideas. That's, again, not a moral thing. I'm not even saying I'm a genius. Like I said, my time at Rice was very, very humbling, but I can't fundamentally go to a place where I'm required to like just play along and not share ideas. I just can't, and that's why if I ever, do live streams or people talk to me, I want them to express their full thoughts. You know, even if I don't agree or they're wrong, I don't like that people are censored. I think it's very, very evil for people to be required to be stupid. And I believe that that is the way it is in the world right now, everywhere, not just in corporate America. So I obviously will do what I can to not ever, advance that agenda in any way. And so more of the same, at Amazon, I was quickly sort of identified, and this was my first experience into a performance improvement plan. And I have a video on that where I explain how satanic that is. It's not just at Amazon, it's used everywhere. I'm actually, I don't know. I think that, again, I didn't know what was going on at that time. I was just like, man, like I just had ideas. I was trying to like implement new things and make people's lives easier. And I didn't know what was going on. And so I was kind of shocked and sad because, I thought, I could have had a good experience at Amazon and all that kind of stuff. But it was just boring. It's just, you're just sitting there trying to kill, 8 hours, 9 hours a day. And then you have to work every day in November and December during their peak months. And so, it's just literally just corporate slavery. And I actually don't necessarily mind corporate slavery. I just will not compromise on having to be stupid. I don't even know how to function in that situation where I'm not able to share ideas. So this video is getting long. I'm going to do a part 2. I'll just stop it here.